Good morning, everyone. In the last class, we are trying to discuss with some of the methods like the constructor creations and the method creations we identified. And initially, we are checking with the object creation how exactly the object is we are going to create, and before creating an object, how we are defining this particular object information. So, like once we are defining what are the like properties information we can access, like after creating an object, what exactly the data is going to change we identified in the last class. Okay, now what I'm going to do here, so we'll try to check with the constructor here, because in the yesterday, if you observe carefully, we created the two methods here. So we created two methods. So one method is a name of the one method is volume, and another method is called set values. Getting the point. So carefully observe here the method having unique behavior. The each method having here the unique behavior here. So carefully observe here the particular value method what is doing here. So internally is trying to multiply some of the values and iterating the value of the particular box here. But this set values method what is doing here, whatever the parameter values we are passing, so those information is setting into the class level variable, something called instance variable. Getting the point. So same way, so when we are creating a constructor, when we are creating this particular default constructor, what is doing here? So we are trying to make default values of the particular fields. Fields is nothing but the particular properties which we are defining as a class level. Getting the point. Now, what are the default values we are setting here? Something called 10, 20, and 30. So when we are calling this particular set values method, what will happen internally? The default values are going to override with so whatever the dynamic values we are passing into this particular set values method. So where we are calling this set values method, you can observe here, after creating the particular object of this particular class, so we are calling the method here. But make sure here, whatever we are doing here, everything we are working with the object reference. So without the object reference, as of now, we did not do any changes here. Getting the point. So this is also very important here. Back to here. So here we already identified this is the default constructor. What is doing here is trying to provide the default values of each property here. Right. Now, so we'll check with the parameterized constructor here. So parameterized constructor is nothing but, so name of the constructor, what we are going to do, same like how we are adding this particular, how we are adding the variable information, same thing we are going to add here. Observe here, this is the name of the constructor, something called box. And what I'm doing here, I'm trying to specify the parameter information. How many parameter is taking here? Taking 3 parameters here. Getting the point. It's taking 3 parameters. Now what we can do? So simply we can copy this information. And so why I'm copying this information? So basically again it's having some scope here. Again it's having some scope here. So that's the reason what we can do, whatever the local variable value we are going to get. So what we are doing here, we are assigning into the class level variable. We are assigning into class level variable. So whenever the application like something like application, the variable initialization here, so is going to happen. The right side value is going to initialize into the left side value. So something called the W is a right side value. What we are doing here, we are initializing into the left side called width. And here the right side value is something called left. It is a local variable to this particular constructor of this particular box. And carefully observe here, here also we are creating the constructor. So what is the difference between these constructor, the line number 12 constructor and line number 6 constructor here? Getting the point. And here, if we are not passing any parameter, we are going to call as a default constructor. Right. when we are specifying some parameter information, but how we are how we identified whether these are the parameters, because within this particular braces, if we are trying to specify any data type information, so those information is going to treated as a parameter of the particular constructor, and here, so it's going to treat it as a parameter of this particular method here. So see the difference between constructor and the method. So the constructor here, it's having the name of the class name, but method name it does not have with the class name here. So we can define whatever the name we want to specify here, right? But internally, if we observe, it's performing same thing here. But same method, so carefully observe, here it is returning something here, but internally it's checking with some multiplication operation and it's returning some value. So that is the difference between the constructor and the method we are going to have. So again, so when this particular constructor is going to call, right? So we created the constructor here, and we specify the local value to the instance variable here. So back to here, we'll go back to the same box demo. So instead of calling the particular default constructor, now what I can do, directly I can call this particular object information. Getting the point? So carefully observe here. What we are doing here, so we don't want to call this particular setter method. We don't want to call setter method. The purpose of this particular setter method is used to initialize the values, whatever the values we are passing as a parameter. But now what we are doing is the same information we are passing into the constructor. The same information we are passing into the constructor. And this constructor having how many parameters? 3 parameters is taking. So if I'm going to add here one more, something called 4, 5, 6. So see, what is error we are getting here? So remove the argument to match the box, this particular constructor, R is expecting to add one more parameter. Getting the point? And one more information I want to share here. So whenever we are specifying these values internally, is going to treat it as a integer data type or double data type here. The same example we implemented in the last 2-3 days back. So just I want to know so if I'm going to give this particular 100, this is going to treat it as a double or it's going to treat it as a integer. Okay. So if you know anyone, can you message me, or if you does not have any idea, we'll try to focus here. Now I'm trying to save here. What I'm doing here, I'm creating one more box here. I'm creating one more box here, but only the difference here, I'm making integer. I'm making this particular into data type. So simply I want to specify some message here, something called this particular into constructor is calling, and here I want to specify the same message here, only the difference here, data type double. Getting the point? So double constructor and into constructor I specified here. Double constructor and into constructor I am specifying here. So carefully observe here. Now I'm going to run the same example, because we created the constructor and I'm trying to call the constructor here. So carefully observe here, this integer constructor is calling. Why the double constructor is not calling here? So initially when we are calling this particular set volume method, so we'll go one more time here, set volume. The set volume having data type here double. So same we define the constructor also double here. Getting the point. But why this particular constructor is calling? Why not this particular constructor is not calling? So having the question right here. Basically, when we are calling this particular set values method, only one method we are having. So directly it's calling this particular set value method. But here we are having two constructors. They are having different. The data type is different here. So what I want to explain here, when we are specifying, so where all are into data type here. So someone messaged here, so all are into data type. Just I want to confirm where exactly we are having into data type here. So yes. So basically these are the into data type, right? Not the double data type. Getting the point. So that's the reason it's calling the integer constructor. But when we are calling this particular set value method where we define, so the set value method, we don't have the particular integer related the value method. So integer related data type value method we did not find. So that's the reason what it's doing it. Internally, automatic typecasting is happens. Getting the point. Automatic typecasting happened. So that's the reason it's called the double parameterize this particular set value method. So see carefully, if I'm going to comment this particular constructor, again I'm trying to run the same example here. So now you can observe here what is doing it. The particular double constructor is calling. So we are not doing anything. Basically, some lower data type to higher data type, whenever we are performing any operation here, what will happen here? So automatic type conversion is going to happen. So we don't want to add explicitly. So this is I want to explain here. Getting the point. So we have identified with the integer data type as well as the double data type here. Okay. So back to here, what we are doing here? Back to here, in the box class, we are having default constructor and we are having one more parameterized constructor. So this is the way we can work with the constructors here. So if we want to specify, we don't want to work with the default values. What we can do here, directly we can check with the parameterized constructor. Right. So this is the constructor information here. Now we'll check with this keyword here. So this is very important here. So I'm talking about this particular keyword here, something called so I did not change any code here, just I commented this particular constructor information here. So once we commented this particular constructor here, so automatically it's calling this particular box. Okay, so back to here, I'm trying to discuss with this particular keyword called this. So where exactly it's going to use, getting the point. Basically, whenever we are using this particular this, is going to define, like is going to refer the current class constructor. Yeah, we can pass with the double values, no problem. Okay, back to here. So some of the people they are asking the questions. Okay, back to here. So what I want to explain here, this keyword is going to use, like is going to refer current class object. So what is the current class we are having here? The current class is nothing but box here, right? The current class is nothing but box. So basically, what I want to share information here, if I'm going to use this particular width here, if I'm going to use this particular width, so see some color information here. Basically, okay, let me save here. So basically, what I want to explain here, whenever we are working with this particular variable name as the instance variable with same name. So whenever we are working with the local variable name as well as the class level variable, if we are working with the same name, the compiler will get a confusion here. So which is the local variable and which is the instance variable. If we observe carefully the line number 14 here, what we are doing here, so it's the compiler is going to treat it as this both variable also local variable. So if we observe here, and whenever we are calling this particular value method, we are going to get 0 here. So why we are going to get 0? So we'll see. So that I will explain more. So you can observe here the value we are getting 0, and before we got some output here, but now we are getting 0. Now why we are getting 0 here? Back to here. Whenever we are passing this particular width variable, something called, what is the value we are going to pass normally? It is 100. Getting the point. So after executing this particular box, how many variables we are going to have? This particular width still we will have 0. Right. This particular height we will have something called 150. We'll get this particular width 0. Because I explained, so whenever we are working with a local variable, so the scope of the local variable available up to the particular block of code. Wherever we are defining the block of code, up to the block of code, the local variable we can access here. So same way, this particular width is a local variable to this particular sector. Getting the point. So carefully observe here. Compiler is going to treat it as these two variables also local variable, not instance variable. Because of that, what happened here? This instance variable not initialized. Getting the point. So this instance variable is not initialized. Again, you are going to have one more question here. So if this particular box is not initialized with the instance variable, already we are having an example with the default constructor. So we may get this particular 10 values. Getting the point. So this is very important here. Basically, in the last example we identified when we are calling this particular constructor. So I explained here the default values we are going to initialize these. Right. Whenever we are calling this particular set value method, what happens here? The default values are going to override. But here, when we are calling the parameterized constructor, the logic is little bit different here. This default constructor is not going to call. Whenever we are calling explicitly the parameterized constructor, getting the point. So this is very important here. Even we are not going to get any default values also. Even we are not going to get any default values. So this is important. So directly, what is the value we are going to get here? After executing this particular constructor, still if you are not specifying any values to this particular width, then the default values will come into the picture. What is the default value here? That is called 0.0. Because what we are doing internally, whenever we are calling this particular constructor, so manually we are assigning the particular instance variable information, right? So that's the reason still this particular width variable we are getting 0. Because of 0, if I am calling this particular value method, so 0 to anything, we are going to get 0 here. Now, to reduce this kind of problem, what we can do here, I want to use this here. I want to use this keyword here. So carefully observe here. So first we'll check with a simple example. Later we'll back to the current example, how exactly it's working internally. So observe carefully. We are getting some values here. But what I want to explain here, so as I explained here, whenever we are using this particular so it's going to refer the current class object. So current class object is nothing but this is our current class object. And inside this particular current class object, what we are doing is we are trying to access the particular width variable. So whenever this particular box is calling, what we are doing here, so whatever the local values we are having, so I'm giving I'm sharing the information to the compiler. So can you initialize the value which we are getting from the local to this particular width variable which is available at the class level? Getting the point. So this is the way we can work with, and even though if this particular variable names are different, still also we can work with this keyword here. So basically every time what is doing here is refer to the current class object. In the current class object 100% we are going to get this variable information, right? So it is not going to access the different class, it is accessing the current class information. So this is also very important here. But now, so whenever we are calling this particular value method, what I am doing here, I want to call one more method internally. So that is, so something called, I want to call some test method here. Okay, this particular test method is not doing anything here. But here, so just I want to explain information here. Whenever, if we want to call this particular test method, so we can also use this particular, this dot test here. Right. What happened here? So this dot test here. And again, what we are doing here, this is the current class reference and we are calling the test method. So if you open the reference document of or any source code of this particular Java, so you are going to get this keyword internally it's calling the methods here. So this is the real-time applications we are going to develop like this here. If we want to call the inside the class, this is not the outside of the class. Inside the class, if we want to call any method, we are going to call like this. So again, so why we are using this here? This is nothing but we are calling the current class object reference. We're calling the test method here, right? So this is also very important here. So any questions regarding this keyword here? Okay. So if you don't have anything, now what I will do, I'm going to create one more example. So basically just I want to specify some array related example here. Here I want to specify something called stack related example here. What I'm doing here, I'm creating one class called stack test here, right? So this is also very important example. Basically what I want to show you here, I'm creating one stack here. Stack is nothing but integer array I'm creating here, and with some size here. The size I'm specifying 10 here. And here, so one more variable I'm taking as a TOS. Getting the point. And here I'm calling one constructor. The default constructor I'm calling here. Inside the default constructor, what I'm doing here, so observe carefully, I'm making I'm trying to initialize -1 here. Right. And after that, what I'm doing here, I'm calling one method called push. So it's going to take as a one parameter something called item. So I don't want to explain one more time the method information. Already We had an example. So internally, what I am checking here. So careful observe here. If this particular TOS equals to 9, so just I want to specify one message here. I want to specify one message, something called stack is full. Getting the point. And else, what I can do, I want to increase TOS is equals to item. Getting the point. So if this particular TOS is equals to 9, so we are going to get this particular message. Else, we are trying to insert the information into this particular stack here. Same way, we are going to have one more method, something called pop. And carefully observe here, this particular pop method returning some value that is called into data type. Getting the point. And now, one more condition I want to specify, something called if TOS less than 0, what we can do? So we need to print some message here. Stack underflow and return the default value of this particular method. And here, what I am doing here, else here, simply I want to return stack minus minus. Getting the point. So whenever we are having one line, so we can define like this. So whenever we are having more than one line, we can define like this. So see the difference here. Now what I am doing here, basically I define one class here. What I define one class here. What I am doing here, I'm trying to define this particular two sections here. So one, we are creating one array and one more variable I defined here. So this particular variable is going to work as the index of this particular array. Getting the point. And we define two methods here. To insert to record and to get the record, we define these two methods. So we'll go back to the main method. We'll go back to the main method. So to work with the main method, now what I'm doing is I'm creating one more class here, something called test stack. Right. And here, what I'm doing here, simply we'll first create a stack test here, something called test. And I'm calling the default constructor. Getting the point. How many objects I'm creating here? So two objects I'm trying to create here. Getting the point. So after creating here, what I am doing here, I want to use loop here. I want to use loop because we want to insert more than one record. Getting the point. So we can go for the loop here. Int I equals to 0, I less than 10, and I plus plus. So what I am doing here, something called test dot. What is the method we are having? Push method. What we can do? I value we can specify. Getting the point. So we can call the I value, whatever the I value we are going to get, I am assigning here. So one more here, int I is equals to 10. And this particular I less than, I want to make 20. One more I plus plus. So this is also test1 dot push method. I want to use the same I here. Right. how many loops we are implementing here? And this particular two loops, that what they are going to do, it will try to insert the record into this particular stack. The stack we already implemented in the particular stack test. And after that, after inserting, what we can do, we need to get an object here. We need to get an object here. Right. So to get an object also, what we can do, we'll try to specify the message first. Here, test.pop. And I want to use one more for loop here. Let me use these two loops here. Here, what I can do, the same value I want to specify, but only the difference here. Only the difference here. Here, what we are going to do, okay, we don't want to specify any message, something called test.pop. And test1.pop. Test1.pop here. So here, I want to print one more. Here, this is the test1.pop. Observe carefully. So how we are working with this particular, the condition wise, how we are trying to implement here. So what I want to explain here, basically, you can check here. The test pop is calling. For inserting, we don't have any sysout. Only we implemented for getting in an element from the particular stack. So initially, what we are doing here, we are trying to specify, so we are trying to load an object, right? And this is nothing but the second information, the second stack here. So any questions here? So this is the way we can make something called the conditions here, getting the point. So instead of directly accessing the stock, what we are doing here, so instead of directly accessing the stock, what we are doing here, we are having the methods here. So using the method, we are going to call the, we are going to insert the record, or we are going to load the particular record. So initially what we are doing here, so directly we are going to create this particular stack, and we are going to insert the information into this particular stack. Right now, instead of accessing this particular stack directly, we are having an option called calling this particular methods here. So getting the point. So here, what exactly we are going to get here, just I want to explain here. So this is the one kind of the particular OOPS principle we are going to get here. So that is called encapsulation. We are going to get it here. So exactly the encapsulations, how exactly it's working here. Now, instead of working the data directly, so what we are doing here, we are calling the methods to insert and get the information. So we'll try to have the more information about the particular OOPS principles here, right? So basically, this is a simple example I want to share you. So how exactly we can work here. Getting the point. So we'll try to have the more example on this particular OOPS principles here. Any questions regarding this particular stack test? So someone is asking the question here. For push method, we use the ++ toss, which is pre-increment. Yes, it is a pre-increment. So why it is pre-increment here? What we are doing is the toss initially we are making -1, getting the point. So we want to insert the record into 0 location, because the arrays is going to insert the records from 0 to the length of the array here. that starting element is 0. So that's the reason I'm using pre-increment variable here. Yes. So if you observe here, if you go to this particular console, where is this? Check here, if I'm going to use this particular toss minus minus, what is the value we are getting here? Whatever the last element we are having, we are getting here. So we'll try to focus the simple example here by adding this particular breakpoint here. Now let me run the same example in a debug mode so that you will have an idea how exactly it's working internally. So you can observe here, this particular pop method is called, and we can check here pop having 9 element. So something called, it is a index here. So if you want to check here, you can check here, the toss is having 9. So you can check in the stock here. These are the 0 to 9 elements are stored here. 0 to 9 elements are stored here. Getting the point. Now this condition is satisfied, not satisfied. It's not going to satisfy. It will go back to the else here. So you can check here. So what we are doing here? Toss. So initially, so this is very important here. We already discussed with the pre-increment and post-increment here. What exactly is going to do? After executing this, what we are doing here? We are decreasing the size of this particular, particular array here. Something called the toss variable is going to decrease here. So this is a post decrement operator. It's not a pre-decrement operator here. So that is the difference here. This is the pre-increment operator. This is the post-decrement operator here. Back to here. Now, so here what we are going to get here, initially the toss, whatever the toss value we are having right now, the value is going to print. And after that, you can check here, the toss is, right now it is 9. If I'm going to click this particular F6, you can observe here. You can observe, okay, now we are into the test stock method. So we'll go back to the one more time here. So you can observe the 9 is printed here, but the particular 9 is printed. What I'm doing here, I'm going one more time here. So you can check inside this particular toss here. So what is the value we are getting? 8. Initially it was 9. Now we are getting 8. Getting the point. So how we are getting here? Because of this particular post decrement operator in the sense, after completion of the operation, the value is going to decrease. Same way, if I'm going to use here this, if I'm going to use this particular post increment operator, what it will do? After inserting a record, the toss value is going to increase here. Getting the point. So that is the difference between the post increment and the pre increment here. So if I'm going to run this example, again the value will print. The value is printed now. So the value is changed here. So if you want to check here this particular toss, we can identify it has become 7. So this is the way the post increment and pre increment operators will work. Right. So back to here. Any questions still? Okay. Now this is all about the simple example we implemented here using the methods here, right? So we'll go back to the more information like overloading concept here. So this is also very important concept here. So how exactly the overload concept is going to work here, and the overloading concept we can work with the methods as well as constructor also we can work with this particular overloading concept, right? And basically whenever we are like working with this particular overloading, the name of the, so first we'll check with the methods, and the name of the method, we are going to have the same name, and only the difference here, we are going to provide the different parameters here, different parameters. So again, we'll go for the box class here, and now what I am doing here, so something here, name of the set volume is the same, name of the method, it's same here. The only the difference here, something called, I want to specify something called char. And observe here, if I'm going to change only one data type here, so we are not getting any compilation errors here. So that is the advantages we are going to get here. So only the syntax we need to follow carefully. Name of the method, both the methods having the same name. Only the difference here, initially this parameters having the double, right? So here also we are having the two double data type here, but initially the first one is different, that is the char. Order of the parameters is different, and type of the parameter also different. So this is I want to explain here. The order of the parameter you can observe here. So it's having three data types variable, and here also we are having three data types variable, right? The three data type variables having different two data types here. So you can check here, that's the reason we are not going to get any the particular compilation error. So to call this particular set value, to call this particular set values method, now what we are going to do, so simply the values we are going to specify, like see some character we need to specify, something called 125.0, right, 145.0. So whenever we are specifying this particular parameter information, this particular method is going to call. And this method we already identified when we were discussing the previous classes here. Getting the point. So this is the way we can define. Now we'll try to check with the remaining so different example on this. Let me save this particular example. We'll create a one more example here. We'll go back to the different perspective, and let me create a one more class here, something called overload demo. So here what I want to do, I am having one method called test. I'm having one method called test. This particular method is not going to take any parameters. So simply I want to print no parameters, right? And same, I want to use the test method and is expecting int a. What I am doing here, something called a value. I'm trying to print a, right? So one more here, the same method test here. So something called int a and int b, int a and int b. So here a and b values here, something called right. So this is the way we can specify. And finally I want to provide one more here with the same method, only the difference here, something called d, something called d. And here double a and a. Right. So observe carefully what we are doing here. What happened? Sorry, here it is not a, it is d. Let me change to D. Right. Observe, this is the default method. It is having one parameter and it is having two parameters. So here it is having same one parameter, but only the difference here, the type is different. Getting the point? The type is different. Same way, how many methods we want to create, we can create here as many methods we are interested. Right. So this is the concept we are going to call overloading. Overloading the method here, and the name of the method is same for all the methods. Only the difference here, the parameter section is different. To work on this, what we need to do? So simply we need to create a object here. We need to create an object here. How we can create an object here? So here only we can create an object here and something called overload demo. Demo is equals to new overload demo. I want to call default constructor demo dot test. So you can see how many test methods we are getting here. 4 test methods we are getting. The 4 test methods we created, right? So simply I want to call the demo first default test method, and I want to call the int method. How this int method is going to call? Something called 10, right? And demo dot test. So I want to specify one more here, something called 10 comma 20, and the last method double here. So to specify the double, what we can do, something called, so these are the method information, right? So we'll try to execute the same example here. Observe here, the first one no parameters, and the second one we are getting a value, and the third construct is calling a and b values, and the double we are getting here. Getting the point? So basically, whenever we are specifying the particular data type value, so this method is going to call. So if I'm going to remove the dot 12, what will happen here? So check here, the a value is going to print. A value is going to print. So carefully observe here, a value is printed. So here also a value is printed, right? So what will happen here? Whenever we are specifying here, the compiler is going to treat it as a int type, not the double type. So if the compiler is treating as a int type, this method will not execute. So this method is going to execute. The line number 6 method is going to execute. So instead of the line number 12 method. Getting the point? So this is also very important here. Now, so we understand how exactly it's working here. And one more I want to specify here. So I want to make this particular double. This particular method I want to make double here. So simply here d into d something. So understanding here only the difference here is going to check with the parameter. It's not going to consider with the return type here. That is I want to cover here, and the d value we are going to print, and I want to specify one more time 123.12 123.12. Here what I can do, simply I will print this value, or else okay, we can print here what I am doing here. I want to call this same thing here. Here I want to specify the whatever this particular test method is returning. So we are copying into this particular sysout. Right. Carefully observe. So at this time, the output we may get some difference here. So you can check here. This is the this is the this particular double test method return. So basically, why I'm specifying this method, some return type here, whenever we are working on the overloading concept, is not going to check with any return type here. So only it's going to check with the particular parameters, order of the parameter and type of the parameter is going to consider very well. So that's the reason I'm checking the last one, some return type here. Right. So any questions regarding this particular method overloading? Sorry, method overloading here, not writing here. So we'll check with the same concept for this particular constructors. The same concept for the constructors here. So to check with the constructors, what we can do, we'll go back to the box class here and see here what I'm doing here. I want to, already we identified one constructor here is going to take 3 parameters. Right. And one more I want to specify here. One more here. So instead of specifying the 10 values, okay, we'll keep as it is. And one more constructor I want to specify. Something called double year length here. Some variable. So this is the one more constructor I'm specifying here. As of now, we are trying to create 3 constructors here. So let me add information into this particular constructor here. Now, what I'm doing here? So observe width is equals to height is equals to depth is equals to length. So whatever whatever I'm trying to pass, the same value I'm trying to assigning into the 3 variables here. This is the different constructor here. And one more constructor I want to call. Okay, let me make it here box here. Let me create something called double D, double and double H. Only 2 parameters constructor. So what I am doing here, I want to call here something double. And so here what I'm doing here, this dot, here I want to specify the width value H comma D. So carefully observe here, this is also very important here. Using the particular overload constructor internally, we are using this keyword. So we'll check here. I want to make the width value, whatever the width value we are getting here. Okay, sorry. So here only we need to keep. And I don't want to make these 2 as of now. And what I'm doing here, I'm calling this particular width here. So I'm calling width and height. So here, what I'm doing here, height is equals to H. And I don't want to use this. So carefully observe here how exactly we are calling. Whenever we are calling this particular constructor, internally, what is doing here? So using this, what is doing here is going to call this constructor. Sorry, this constructor is going to call. It's having 2 parameters. Internally, what we are doing here, again we are calling one more constructor. So that is called, this constructor is going to call. So see, the calling is very important here, right? But now make sure this is the one constructor, it is the default constructor, and this is taking 3 parameters, and this is taking 1 parameter, this is taking 2 parameter. So this is known as a overloading constructor, right? So we'll try to check with this constructor. So to understand how exactly it is calling, now what we can do, so we cannot add before this particular this keyword anything we need to add. Okay, this the default construct double constructor is calling, and so here I want to specify the constructor information here. To understand here, getting the point. Same way I want to specify this constructor. So instead of double, we want to specify the parameter section, and finally we want to specify this, and here getting the point. Now we'll try to call the same example here. We'll try to call the same example here, but make sure here I'm providing two information here. One is the overloading the constructor, and how we can use the this keyword inside the constructor. So first observe here, basically we are calling this constructor, right? This constructor having 3 parameters. But if we observe which constructor is called first, this constructor is called first, the single parameter. Later it is calling the double parameter. Later it is calling the 3 parameters constructor here. Getting the point. And later, so again why it is calling, okay, we are having 2 records. We are having 2 object information. So because of that, we are getting this information. But still, we are getting 0. The value we are getting 0. So we'll try to check how exactly this constructors are going to call internally. But make sure, so this is the overloading constructor to create it with a different parameter names. So in the tomorrow, we'll try to check with how exactly this keyword is working and why we are getting this particular, the value as a 0. The particular value we are getting 0 here. So we'll try to focus on this particular 0 in tomorrow class. Any questions regarding this particular constructor? Okay. So if we don't have any questions, we can conclude the class and we'll continue tomorrow.